the intro and the close is very Kristen Zeman. We have a jam there.
Okay. All right. So I'll intro. All right.
You ready, Michelle?
I am ready.
Okay. All right. Hang on to your beaver tail.
I'm in public, for the love of Jesus.
Hey, it's a thing.
Beaver tail.
You don't know what a beaver tail is? A good, authentic Canadian beaver tail.
What is it, Sil?
So
I dare you to Google beaver tail on your phone, or maybe your work computer. Go ahead.
Computer.
The Hollow Buddy. And we all feel hollow sometimes.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast. I'm Kristen Zeman, and I'm here with my beautiful co-host, Sylvia Moyer. We are both former police chiefs, but the Hollow Bunny podcast is not just for cops. It is for anyone who has an interest in talking about life and leadership, particularly the lessons that we've learned about both. And those lessons fill up the Hollow Bunny, metaphorically, or AKA the empty suit. So we have today, Sylvia, our guest today. Okay,
Wow.
Our first international guest. Let me just say that our first international guest, Deputy Chief Michelle Davey. She served 24 years with the Vancouver Police Department, and in 2021, she took on a new role as a Delta Police Department Deputy Chief. She has a wide range of experience in operations, investigations, and administratives. I'm going to not even read that bio at all because I just want to talk to you. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to our little podcast.
Well, thanks, but I feel like I might actually be in the wrong podcast because I thought we were here to talk about pickleball.
I wish I could screenshot Sylvia's face right now.
I so want to hate on you for that, but it's okay. It is the fastest growing sport in the United States.
Oh, is it a sport or is it a skill?
In the world, maybe.
Is it a sport or is it a skill?
We could ask that of baseball, golf. There are a few other quote unquote sports, I guess we could apply that to, but it is most definitely a sport. The fastest growing sport. Are we not talking about that today, or?
Oh, this is
leadership.
Michelle,
Okay, leadership.
Wrong
Gotcha.
podcast.
I find it
Oopsie. Okay.
I find it super interesting that you threw down immediately. I'm okay with it. Super edgy. I see what your bunny is full of, so I'm really stoked to explore this more.
All right, listen. I want to get into it because I met Michelle at the IAWP conference in Niagara Falls, although we had been in conversation prior to that because she invited me to come speak at the Canadian Chiefs Conference. Thank you so much for inviting me. So we became buds, but I just absolutely I adore her because very like-minded, still very like-minded as far as, you know, what you and I think about leadership. And so we've had many conversations about women in leadership, but let me back up. Michelle, how did you get started in law enforcement? Was that something that you always wanted to do, or did you fall into it?
Yeah, unlike you and Sylvia, I don't know what your background is in wanting to be a police officer because I haven't read your book yet. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because you're still writing it, right?
She actually is.
Yeah. No, I can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
I did not always want to be a police officer. I did not grow up wanting to be a police officer and sort of fell into it happenstance. You can't tell by listening to me, but I'm extremely tall. No, I'm not. I'm actually really short, but I did play varsity basketball at university. And in the course of summer training, we would play against police officers, anybody actually who wanted to come and train with us and play against us and give us a good game. And one of them happened to be a police officer who worked in Vancouver. So she came out, we became friends. We played basketball together for a bit. And then she invited me out on a ride along. And I went out with her and we drove the prisoner transport wagon in a very challenging but rich neighborhood called the downtown east side of Vancouver. And we drove the wagon on a term that we used here to describe the day that many people receive their social assistance checks. So Welfare Wednesday is what we used to call it. So we drove the wagon on Welfare Wednesday, and it was the highlight of my early growing up time. It was on that shift that I decided I had to become a police officer, and specifically, I had to become a police officer in Vancouver. I was so taken by people that we came into contact with, and the just overwhelming need and feeling to want to contribute to making some really tough circumstances back in the day better. I was going to school to be a physiotherapist, so I always sort of had a service, industry related career in mind. But as soon as I went on that ride along and we just came across so many challenging circumstances, I knew I had found my calling. And it really is a calling, for, cops who are listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. It's something that actually occupies your soul. It's not a job. It's something we think about all the time. It's a calling that is of something that's greater than ourselves, which is really cool. So to be given the opportunity to be able to do that type of work is just a phenomenal privilege in our society. Although I know it sometimes doesn't feel that way with the level of criticism, et cetera, that is levied against our profession on a regular basis. And, we certainly do deserve criticism in some circumstances, but in many, there are millions and millions of contacts with the public every day that are just so wholesome and genuine and caring in nature that, all of us possess, that we just want to make a difference.
Oh, I love that so much. I mean, that truly encapsulates it. Now, did you grow up in the Vancouver area or not?
I did not. I, like many people in British Columbia, one of the most beautiful provinces we have in Canada, am a transplant from another part of the world. So I grew up in a small city in Ontario called Sault Ste. Marie. And I left there at about 18 to go to university in Southern Ontario, and then decided to take a year off and told my mother I was dropping out of university to become a ski bunny and ski lift operator at a ski hill in British Columbia, and she freaked out, and I've never been back. Sorry, Mom.
How did she take you wanting to be a police officer?
Super supportive of the profession. I don't think they really understood what I was getting myself into. And, it is certainly in the 90s when I was hired at the age of 12, it was a different time. It was far fewer guns on the street, far less violence targeted towards police, certainly in Canada. So it was quite a safe profession with inherent risks, of course, but the training's phenomenal, and you're equipped with the right tools to be able to deal with things. It's evolved certainly since then. We see a lot more violence. We see a lot more mental health related issues on the street now, with a lot of mental supports waning in society, certainly in Canada, that, there isn't adequate institutional options for people that really should have full-time support. Mm-hmm. So it's changed. And today I would say it's probably is a much more dangerous profession than when I started.
Yeah, no kidding. When you came, I was looking at the statistics when I came to speak, and women in law enforcement are 12% in the US, and you guys have far more impressive numbers, 22%, 22%. Is that of females in policing?
Yeah, so we've certainly come a long way as well. When I was hired in Vancouver, I was one of about 100 female police officers out of about 1,000 when I was hired. And I think Vancouver's up around 28, 29% females now. So they've certainly come a long way. But in Canada, we sit around 23%. Mm-hmm. But still, when you think about women making up 51% of the population, mm-hmm. we do still have a long way to go in that respect. And it certainly became a bit of a seed for me as I rose through the ranks and took on leadership roles and had a lot more lived experience as a leader in policing, finding myself the only woman, like I'm sure both of you have found yourselves at many executive tables, being the only woman there, facing our own challenges, it really sparked an interest in me to want to learn a little bit more about why that was the case and what could we do about it. So yeah, it's an ever growing topic, and I think there's a lot of really cool initiatives that have started to try and change the conversation about police leadership and women's role in police leadership, certainly across both Canada and the US.
So was it deliberate recruiting for I'm calling them higher numbers of women in policing, in all ranks? Is that deliberate recruiting, or is it just more women are interested in the job, or is that something that, people decided to go recruit, in a very purposeful way?
I think recruiting's evolved over time. I think back when I joined, it certainly wasn't a focus on any particular demographic. I didn't experience that with specific workshops to target women or people of color to join policing, but I definitely have seen that trending now. There are a lot, and including in the Delta Police Department, we have our own targeted recruiting for areas where we lack representation. So we'll do a women's night. We just did one for the 2S plus LGBTQ community. We'll be hosting a South Asian information session just to target specific communities that we are underrepresented in the Delta Police Department, and many agencies across the country are doing the same thing.
Yeah, no kidding. So when you went and got your master's degree, I know that's been relatively recent, and so I know you'll find this so interesting. When Deputy Chief Davey was giving a presentation at IAWP that I sat in on, she was talking about the disparity of women in rank, and there was a statistic that you put up that I was just blown away by, that 77% of men answered that they did not think there were any barriers to promotion for women in policing.
Wow.
But wait, 64%,
Wow.
but 64% of women did.
Wow.
I mean, chew on that for just a moment.
Yeah, that's one worth saying a couple of times, right? So I did a little. So yes, I did my master's, and the area of focus for my research was perceived and real barriers to promotion for women in municipal policing in Canada. So we have this large policing institution in Canada called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, and that is what you picture when you picture policing in Canada. They've got the most beautiful dress uniform in the world, and they're so recognizable. And they certainly perform some amazing policing functions across our country. And then you have a whole other municipal side where individual cities will contract policing services that are outside of the RCMP. So the rank structure in the RCMP is very different than the rank structure in municipal policing, and I wanted to compare apples to apples. So I excluded the RCMP in my research. And I did a study that sent a survey to most of the major large municipal police agencies in Canada. There's about 194 municipal agencies in total. And of that, I sent to about 11 agencies with 1,000 members or more. And I asked very specific questions about barriers to promotion to both men and women. And I had about 500, just over 500 responses. 58% were men, 41% women. And that is the most striking finding, was that 77% of the men who responded said that they didn't perceive there to be barriers for women. And yet the women were reporting back in droves that they indeed were experiencing barriers to their promotion. And the rub with that for me is that the majority of people who are responsible for setting policy and procedure around promotion in police agencies in Canada are men. So if they do not think that there are barriers for women to get promoted, then they're not going to pay attention to those barriers and change will not happen. So my hope out of this research, and it's been really fantastic to get the opportunity to be able to travel nationally to be able to present these findings. And, the police leaders have been very receptive, and we're starting to see change, but change takes time. When I started this research, there were 6 female police chiefs in the country out of 194 agencies, and now we're down to 3, sadly. But where I am seeing growth is in the ranks below chief, as we start to see more women promoted into inspector ranks, to, I think that's a captain equivalent, I guess, in the States, superintendent ranks, deputy chief ranks. So that's encouraging because they'll get some time in those ranks to develop to be able to then take the next step into chief. So I expect in the next 10 years, we'll see a significant increase in the number of women represented at the top leadership ranks in the country.
Michelle, it's incredible, the findings. And I wonder, here you're our first international guest, right? And I wonder, there are some core leadership and system things that could influence, irrespective of what country the leadership is housed. You actually cited on your Twitter from the Journal of Community Safety and Wellbeing an article about the agony of proposing system-wide change. And might this topic that you're talking about in your research findings, and then coupled with that article, really give some leadership imperatives and some leadership action that could be taken on the system-wide and the leadership kind of arenas to move the needle in this area? What do you think about that?
I think it takes a group of leaders open to that type of feedback first in order to be able to consider a system-wide change. It's always hard to change systemic issues that affect any agency, really any sector.
No doubt.
But we are talking about systemic change, and you hear more often now on the lips of many police leaders, male and female, the terms equity, diversity, and inclusion. And accessibility is now being added to that list. And that's encouraging because those are leaders who, maybe initially they were ticking the box off to say, yes, I'm, working on becoming more equitable, diverse, and inclusive in my leadership. But I actually really see leaders now stepping into that paradigm shift and embracing programs such as 30 by 30. And 30 by 30 is a US based program. And the Delta Police Department was the first Canadian or international, if I can use your term. We're just to the north of you. We're your neighbors.
North America. Yeah.
We're just trying to bolster our credibility. That
I hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
Get a million
Just
and a
wait
half
till we go to
listeners now.
space.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
initiatives like that I see numerous agencies signing on to, and it's that public acknowledgement and accountability that signing on to a program like 30 by 30, will hold that agency, because it probably won't be the leader who's in place today, who's still there in 30-30, accountable to a path for increasing that diversity at the highest level. That's an example of the system buying into these concepts and taking a tangible step to making a difference.
One of the conversations that we had at the conference, especially with the diversity conference and that being the focus, was that the attendees, of course, it's completely voluntary. So the attendees who are sitting in the audience are typically the ones who already get it. And I was joking with the men during my presentation, and I said, we put you into 2 categories, those who get it and those who don't. And but acknowledging that men are the gatekeepers, as you mentioned, because they are the majority and they are the policymakers. And so it's those great men that are going to lead us into the new territory. So then how do we get these men who, quote, get it, to bring over the ones that don't? And that's therein to me lies the biggest gap that we have, and that's why, progress seems so slow.
Yeah, all 300 people sitting in that room were not the people who actually needed the material delivered at that equity, diversity, and inclusion conference.
Mm,
It's everybody who wasn't there, and you're
mm,
absolutely right. And I'm going to borrow a page out of your book, Kristen, and suggest that your recommendation to become a disruptor
mm.
is a way for all 300 of those people to take what they have learned at this conference. And I know that many people who attended that conference were actually coming away saying, this is the best conference I've ever been to. The material was incredible. I have tools in my toolbox I can go home with. Kristen Zeman was the most phenomenal speaker ever.
Right?
Like,
Right?
we want to
Ever.
More
hire
about that.
her.
Oh gosh, we really
So
should delve into
the
that.
the feedback
More
was
about that.
unreal, but
Mm,
you pointed
Just
out,
let it wash over you, sister.
right, with your Canada sweatshirt on. I wish your listeners could see you
mm,
sporting it so proudly.
mm.
It matches the glow in your cheeks when you talk about Canada. So, becoming that for those 300 people to turn around, go home, and tell all their friends that this is something they need to buy into because of how, like, we as a conference committee wanted to have people have an emotional experience at this conference, to feel moved by the people who were sharing their
Yep.
stories and giving
Word.
advice. And we did it. We did it. We had people actually feel at that conference
Mm.
and feel strongly enough to go home and tell their friends and phone their colleagues and say, you know, you really got to get into this. And that's how the word is spread. It's through disruption. And, you know, if you're a leader that isn't willing to disrupt, then, you know, maybe the Hello Bunny suit is for you, right?
There
Because
it is.
I do think it is one of the Rice Krispies in that solid bunny that is important.
Mm, that is so.
You know, it's interesting you say that because, you know, we've often said that we don't have to speak to our values. Our values are on full display for everyone to see. It's how we behave.
Mm,
So that conference and what you're talking about in terms of the inspiration and the movement forward and the disruption is about leaders wherever they are in the hierarchy of an organization, public, private, police, otherwise, demonstrating the values to
yeah.
advance the work, to invite diverse inputs, to include folks that haven't typically been included, to actually advance the work. And are you seeing demonstrations of that where you serve, where they're actually advancing the work and demonstrating that inspiration through action?
Yes, yes. You know, it's starting, and I'm encouraged by that. It's police chiefs promoting women into key leadership positions, not token leadership positions, where actual value is added to the organization by that female leader, and the support is there from the chief and standing right beside her saying, yes, you know, she is empowered to make these decisions, and I stand strongly beside her in endorsing the decisions that she's making. So we've gone from having one female deputy chief in the province of British Columbia to 6
Mm,
in the span of the last year and a half, which is incredible. And that's a concrete example of police chiefs, male police chiefs, showing the value of having a diverse leadership team around them to provide that diversity of thought, lived experience, culture, ethnicity, gender to decision making.
yeah.
Because we make better
Word.
decisions when we take into consideration all of those aspects.
Mm,
You know, it's funny. I get asked a lot. I'm the co-chair of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, along with Deputy Chief Farrika Prince, and she's a deputy in the Prince Albert Police Service in Saskatchewan. So we get asked a lot to provide training, quote unquote, training in EDI. And I struggle with that concept. Like, you know, Sylvia, to your point, it really is how you live and breathe and lead through your values that show what your equity, diversity, and inclusion principles are, right? How you speak to people, how inclusive are you in your
Yes.
decision making? I'm not going to stand with a
words we
PowerPoint
choose.
in front of you and train you how to do that.
Yeah.
You have to live that.
Mhm.
And that's where it starts. And I think that's finally starting to sink in to, the importance of living that value.
Oh, I love that you just said that. Sil and I were part of the Police Executive Research Forum, talking about women in policing. And as part of that report, and this is all data and it's, the deliverable is a list of things. And, when I read this list of things, it says, become more inclusive. It's like there are these just check boxes. And yet to your point, it's the actions, it's the it's not just the attributes or this those are to me like abstract things, but it's the action behind it, all of the things that you've just listed, and people setting the example. And I love the phrase, you don't have to be one of to stand with, and and more of that, and that's where those actions are displayed. So I'm just so grateful for the work that you are doing in that space. And I mean it transcends where you are in our corner of the world as well. We have the same issues here. So but let's talk a little bit about leadership. And the reason that you are becoming my new best friend is because I love your thoughts and your wisdom on leadership. Is that something that you have studied? Do you learn it from, throughout the years of studying other leaders? Is it, are they books? Are they, where does your leadership knowledge and wisdom come from?
My current boss, Chief Neil Dubord, is a systems guy, and I love him for that because I know what I know, but I have no freaking clue how I know what I know.
Mhm.
And he has put the system in front of what I know and has tried to explain to me, this is how you know what you know. This is why you know what you know. And it's really cool to talk to him as a leader to understand that system, because that's just not how I think. So yeah, it comes from reading some books and understanding leadership styles of other people, and you take sort of key points away, like Simon Sinek, for example, and his circle of safety concept, and creating an environment around you as a leader so that people who work on your team feel safe and comfortable to bring forward a contrary view to what yours is, or pointing out, hey, Michelle, if you head down this path, you're going to, your train's going to come off the tracks. So
Mhm.
if you don't have that environment in place, then you are destined for failure. Surrounding yourself with people who know more about things than you do, right?
Mhm.
You do not have to be the smartest person in the room. You have to be able to bring a group of people together to get a job done. So you're almost an enabler, you're a facilitator, you're a resource getter as a leader, and you certainly help create the vision for sure. But it really is about creating that team environment to get people to where you want them to go. So a lot of it has come through practical. I really like these things about this leader. I really don't like these things about this leader. So I'm going to take the things I like and I'm going to leave the things I don't. And I'm going to be sure to not do those things to the people who work with me on my team, because I know how it makes me feel, right? So it's a lot of lived experience. I've been in an executive role in policing in Canada since 2014. So I've been at a lot of tables with a lot of leaders, and I've seen a lot of examples of it done very well. And I've seen some examples of it not done very well.
Mhm.
So I think I really think leadership comes not from a book. It comes from practical lived experience, and you make mistakes and you learn from them
Yep.
and you grow and you move forward and you change, and you have to
Yep.
be open to that change.
Retweet. And yet why is it this is we talk about leadership and these principles and these attributes, it seems as though the things that you just said are so common sense, right? Be the boss you wish you had, right? It's how you make people feel, and all of that. And yet we still have a crisis of leadership. And I scratch my head at it, and I guess I'm trying to figure out, as I'm sitting here staring at the book by Ryan Holiday, because Syl and I are big into Stoicism.
Oh.
And I'm looking at the title of this book, and one of them called "Ego is the Enemy." And that is what I found, is that sometimes it's like what you just said, is being able to say, wow, I don't know the answer. I know I'm in this leadership position that puts, a supervisory position that gives me, power, contrived power, but I don't know everything. But when you say that, I mean, that's how I feel when I'm with you, and I know that that's real. And I've watched all of the other women at the conferences and how much they respect you, so I know that those aren't just words. Then why is it that we still have this crisis of leadership? What gets in the way of that? And I that's a tough question.
I think we're scared to have the difficult conversation with certain leaders that they're not cut out to lead, because not everybody is born to be a leader. And we struggle, I'm sure it's a struggle in the health sector, in government, et cetera. We struggle with having tough conversations with people about the reality of their leadership capabilities. And if we had more of those conversations that were honest and supportive and truthful, then I think we would see fewer people in leadership positions that have no idea how to be leaders. It's like, how do you train for EDI? How do you train for leadership? It's a tough one to pin down. There's a lot of people making good money off of leadership courses, et cetera. So there's certainly some value in teaching the wisdom of the fundamentals of good leadership practice. But then it requires a self-assessment of whether or not you have those fundamentals that you can actually grow and learn to develop. But I think you actually have to have a baseline of those skills inside you to really grow into that good leadership role. And not everybody does. And guess what? That's okay.
Sure.
We need leaders. We need followers. It's a football team out here. We need all kinds of different positions to be successful, certainly in a police organization. And it's okay. It's not a failure to not become a leader, because you play just as vital of a role as somebody who has to go answer that call for service than the sergeant who runs the call. It's just not, it's okay to not be good at everything.
Oh, I love that.
It's so interesting. I'll use baseball as a baseball person. There's a batting order. Not everybody that's a number 1, 2 hitter is the same as somebody who's a 7, 8, 9 hitter, but they are all vital. So we'll appeal to our U.S. listeners with a little baseball thing. You make a really interesting point here, and I want to circle back on this, Michelle. And to Kristen's point about stoicism and ego is the enemy, I would couple this ego is the enemy, Ryan Holiday, with this other incredible gift that Kristen recently gave me, the David Brooks book, The Second Mountain, where Brooks argues that the first mountain, we're clawing our way to the top and we're acquiring and we are achieving and we're getting all this success and doing all these things that are very individualistic. The second mountain leader has had a dark spot, a reckoning, something that brought them into a valley, and they've ascended on this second mountain that I want to put a finer point on. And that is, it is really in the spirit of egalitarianism. It is giving. It is selfless. It is doing the work, expecting nothing in return, and freeing oneself of the acquisition of stuff and of title and of rank. And it is truly giving in a way that liberates us from ego. And there's a real call to action when we couple those two kind of thoughts, right? And we pair it with what you've offered, Michelle, which is the foundation. So what I'm hearing is there's an introspection and a learning, a skill, so it's training, but then there's also a development. And that is then where we assess how we show up, how we assess what our behaviors do in the environment in which we're leading. And so I think I wanted to put a finer point on that and see if there's anything for us to chew on that would actually fill our bunny.
So there's two things I'll pick up on. Number one, what an amazing plug for your previous episode of the Hollow Bunny to have listeners go back and listen, because you referenced that book and that intellectual exercise in that episode, and I really enjoyed it. To the second point, I think that there is a key aspect of leadership here that it's not something that can be taught. It's something that you're born with. That is the secret ingredient to what I think you're getting at, Sylvia, and that is self-awareness and humility.
Ooh.
I'm floored by the extent of lack of self-awareness in people.
Yeah.
And I sit across the table and I'm like, how can you not know? Like, I'm thinking that so loudly that I swear they hear it. How can you not know? At what point do you stop pointing fingers out and you start pointing fingers in? And
that's what drove me to Botox, because I looked at him like, are you fucking listening to yourself, bro? So just saying,
you
I
have
had
all the lines in your forehead. That's where,
it
right?
manifests in many different ways in us, doesn't it?
That's where masks.
Yes, it does,
Masks were a
Michelle.
positive at some points because you could just hide that poker face when we had to wear the mask. So yeah, you're so right. But see, that comes with that introspection and those truth tellers, building a team of truth tellers. But even that can be difficult because, there are people who are just not open to that kind of, I'll call it feedback, that they become defensive when given feedback. But it's that first moment. And I don't know about you guys, but the greatest gifts I have received in my life were those people who sat down with me and said, hey, you're here, but if you want to get here, this is how you can be better. And I remember listening to that, and some of it was hard to take, right? And and yet I thought, man, you have to really accept that as the gift that it is, and then that's where introspection is born. But sometimes you need that little nudge from truth tellers.
It's just so fascinating to me, because I think this kind of offering, this time that we've been here together, really for our listeners is a nudge. It's a nudge to really do the work, to look at self, and I think challenge ourselves to examine how we show up.
Mm-hmm.
So, Michelle, if you're, I think we need a second episode with Michelle for sure. Yeah.
We can see how the ratings go with your first international guest, and we'll go from there.
Oh man, it's gonna believe.
Hey, Oprah had to cancel today, so we made space for you.
Sylvia, I can't believe you told Michelle that Oprah canceled, and then we asked her. I guess that was
well, duh.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you feel?
like, hello. Of course, like, you should have canceled Oprah in order to get me, because this
For
was
you,
my only time.
That's going to happen.
Honestly, that is, yeah.
True,
Yeah.
that's going to
We are
happen.
going to book Oprah so we can cancel her and bring you back on. That's what we're going to do. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I go ahead, finish your question, Sil, and then I've got one.
So Michelle, if you're to put kind of a list together for our listeners about some things that you have found by witness and experience by being a practitioner and an academic in this leadership space, what are the bullets you're to tell them to summarize, to really focus on in terms of what you've offered in this leadership kind of exploration this morning?
Yeah, I wonder how many of these would actually be on the PowerPoint slide in the leadership class. So, because mine is honestly rooted in trial and error and learning from what has worked, what I've seen work in other leaders, what has worked for me as a leader. And the first one that stands out for me is to be genuine. Be genuine in how you are with people. Really be empathetic, show your compassion, show your vulnerability, show that you're a human, show that you care, take time to care and show that, take time to acknowledge the work of your people. All of that package is so important to make people feel valued and included. Push down decision-making. we hear about the term micromanaging. I really encourage to push down decision making to the right level. You do not have to make all of the decisions. And in fact, you will make your team better if you push that decision making down, have them make the decision, maybe fail, let them fail. And let them learn from that failure in order to grow, because they are the next generation of leader. You hope to be able to walk out the door when you retire or you win the lottery or you get invited to play professional pickleball like I'm hoping to do. And you can walk out like literally on Friday with a clear conscience, knowing that your people are well set up to take over on Monday without needing 3 or 4 months of training and overlap and all this other stuff. Like, really prepare them to step into those leadership roles at the next level all the way along, so that you have a team of people who are ready, and they will appreciate that opportunity. And if you create the environment to allow them to fail and allow them to pick themselves up and learn from that failure, then you're going to create a far better equipped team to be able to continue the succession. That's your goal as a leader, right? As police chiefs, you wanted to probably grow your own chief from the inside, right? But you don't necessarily always have the talent, because you often inherit a leadership team that was put in place before you came along. But if you can start that at the lowest level in your organization and encourage that decision making right down to the front line, at the sergeant level to constables in your platoons, like, wow, in the future, those constables will be so much better served for having made some mistakes, learned along the way, and learn how to make decisions and stand by them.
Oh, Michelle, I got to say, before I pass this off to KZ to close, I have to say a couple things. First of all, constable, super cool. So deputies, officers, constables, all our people. I want to really put a finer point, a pin in this thing that you offered. It's how do we as leaders get individuals to a space where they can fail without feeling like a failure? Mm-hmm. And that is the genuine leadership endeavor, right? To fail without feeling overarching like a failure is so, so important. And you have offered so many nuggets, so much stuff. I want to, I don't know, Kristen, I'm going to apply to be Michelle's best friend. I think there might be an online application. So maybe we'll compete. We'll fight it out. Michelle, you are extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
She'll pick you. She'll pick you. Yeah. You're extraordinary.
You know what?
I can't wait to have you back.
I am today. The hollow bunny is filled with BeaverTails. And
that's a Canadian pastry.
Please encourage your listeners to Google BeaverTail and see what we're talking about here, because it is a Canadian treasure that we are so proud of.
Just don't do it on your work computer. And then my final question
don't make it weird.
Is I will be coming to Canada again for the third time. And then I was just curious, is like, when does actual citizenship happen? When do I become Canadian? Is there a test?
When do we meet Justin Trudeau?
Yeah. And also, is he as handsome as he appears to be, JT?
Right. Well, you could probably, we're so amenable here in Canada. We're so friendly. You could probably stop by on your way through Ottawa to Kelowna, which is not on the East Coast. It's on the West Coast. And, meet him for a BeaverTail. Like, he would probably be open to that. He is very cool.
Poutine?
You could have some poutine with him as well. Yes.
And we'll play some hockey, eh?
That's on the test. You're going to have to work on that one.
Yeah,
that one's on the test for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
how many
player?
And how many points are on the Maple Leaf?
11.
Boom! Mic drop.
11 points on the Maple Leaf.
How many provinces?
I am literally a Canadian
How many provinces?
Now 4 provinces, maybe. Michelle Davey, thank you so much for coming on our little show with our millions of listeners. I know that people will get so much out of this, and we just so appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge, and I appreciate your friendship. So thank you. With that, I will talk us out of here. The Hollow Bunny podcast is produced by Ted Madden, and the song that you are about to hear is written and performed exclusively for this podcast by my handsome and talented son, Jake, and his friends, Fabian and Zoe. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and review it and tell all your friends. If you don't, just move along. Nothing more to see here. Thanks, everybody.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Thank you.
Keep going. BeaverTail. Bye. Bye.
When you look inside, what do you find? Are you content to fall behind? When you lose your way and you've lost your why? Have courage and get ready to fight the hollow bunny. When the way ahead is covered in smoke and you're tired and scared and you're losing hope, you'll open your heart and your eyes and see a challenge and a question. Why not me? To fight the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. When the challenge ahead scares you to death, you tame the imposter inside instead. To change the world, you've got to start small. It takes a leader to say, I don't know it all. And I know I'm gonna fall, but I'll pick it up and come back stronger. Failing forward and moving onward, doing the hard thing and the right thing, forever fighting the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. If you're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. You're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. The monsters are